My name is Peter. I am 70 years old. My son David brought his French fiancée Amélie to meet me at a fancy restaurant. She was charming in English, calling me Dad and admiring my old suit. But then she turned to her parents and said in French, "My God, this ugly cow's son is perfect. I'll marry him for the green card, then divorce him for his inheritance." I just smiled and nodded, pretending not to understand. But as I left, I leaned in and whispered to her in perfect Parisian French, "I loved meeting you all. I bet immigration will find this conversation fascinating too." Before I tell you what happened next and how that one dinner ignited a war they were not prepared for, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. And please hit like and subscribe if you believe that families should be built on truth, not on lies. I arrived at L'Extravaganza 15 minutes early. Habit. At 70, routine is the anchor that keeps your world from spinning apart. I stood by the host's station feeling profoundly out of place. This was a world of hushed tones and dim lighting, where the clinking of silverware sounded like distant chimes. I was wearing my old wool suit. It was a good suit, custom-made, but it was 5 years old. It was the suit I wore to bury my wife Genevieve. I haven't seen a good reason to buy another one since. The restaurant itself was an exercise in excess. Modern art I didn't understand hung on dark paneled walls. The wine glasses on the tables were thin as air. It smelled like money and garlic. I checked my watch, a simple practical timepiece Genevieve had given me for my 40th birthday. My son David rushed in 5 minutes late, looking frantic. He was 38 years old, but he still carried the panicked energy of a teenager who was about to be caught. He was wearing a new suit, a size too tight in the shoulders, and a silk tie that looked slippery and expensive. "Dad, thanks for coming," he said out of breath. He didn't hug me. He just gestured nervously at the table. "They're almost here. Their Uber just pulled up." "I'm not going anywhere, David. Relax." He didn't relax. He looked at me and his eyes scanned my suit. I saw his jaw tighten. It was a flicker lasting only a second, but it was unmistakable. Pure, undiluted shame. He was embarrassed by his own father. "Listen, Dad." He lowered his voice, leaning in. "Amélie and her family, they're sophisticated. They're from Paris. They're used to a certain standard. And I'm not," I asked, keeping my voice mild. "No, I just mean," he stammered, "please just be agreeable." "Okay. Let me do the talking. Don't talk about the old workshop or sawdust or any of that stuff. Just smile." The request stung more than a slap. The workshop was where I had built my life, where I had taught him to ride a bike. But I simply nodded. "I will be on my best behavior, David." I had been a father for 38 years, but tonight I felt like a poor relation, warned not to embarrass the family. The door opened and they glided in. David immediately straightened his already straight tie. Amélie, his 28-year-old fiancée, was stunning. She wore a simple black dress that I knew from my years with Genevieve was anything but simple. It was the kind of dress that cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. Her parents, Bastien and Corinne, followed. They were a matched set. Perfectly tailored, perfectly coiffed, radiating the effortless arrogance of old European money. Corinne, the mother, offered me a cool hand. "A pleasure," she said in accented English. Her eyes swept over my wool suit from the worn lapels to my practical shoes, and in that single glance she had appraised, judged, and dismissed me. Bastien, the father, just gave me a stiff nod. "Peter, it is such an honor." Amélie rushed forward and kissed the air on both sides of my face. Her perfume was expensive and overwhelming. "David has told me so much about his wonderful father." "All good things, I hope," I said, smiling. "Only the best," she laughed. We sat down. David looked like a man about to face a firing squad. He was trying so hard to impress them. Amélie immediately took charge. "We must have the Barolo 2010, she announced to the sommelier, not even looking at the price. Bastien, you will adore it. I saw David flinch. He visibly swallowed when he saw the wine list. $450. He was a mid-level sales manager. I knew what he earned. He couldn't afford this. But he smiled weakly. Wonderful choice, darling. The sommelier poured the wine. Amélie tasted it. Parfait. She then turned to her parents, and the performance began. She switched to French, a rapid, casual Parisian stream of words. Dieu, il ressemble à un fermier, she said, smiling politely at me, as if she were commenting on the wine. My God, he looks like a farmer. My heart stopped. It wasn't just the insult. It was the language. It was the language of Genevieve. My wife, my Genevieve, had been Parisian. We met when I was a young, struggling artisan trying to sell my first furniture pieces in Le Marais. I learned French for her. I learned it in cafes, in arguments in bed. We spoke French every day for 40 years. It was the secret language of our marriage, the language I used to whisper to her when she was sick, the language I spoke at her eulogy. I didn't just understand French. I dreamed in it. I kept the smile frozen on my face, the smile of a simple, deaf old man. I nodded as if agreeing with her. Corinne, the mother, laughed softly behind her napkin. Je n'arrive pas à croire que je dois supporter cette vieille vache. I can't believe I have to tolerate this old cow. Bastien, the father, looked at me with cold assessment. Imbécile, n'est-ce pas dangereux qu'il soit ici? S'il découvre la vérité. Fool. Isn't it dangerous having him here? What if he discovers the truth? Amélie waved her hand dismissively, the diamond on her finger catching the light. Il ne comprend rien. Il est sénile. Regarde ses vêtements. He doesn't understand anything. He's senile. Look at his clothes. I picked up my water glass. My hand was perfectly steady. I had faced tougher negotiations than this. David looked between us, smiling nervously, desperate to be included. What are you all talking about? It looks so serious. Amélie turned to him, the charm switching back on like a light. Oh, darling, Mama was just asking about the history of the restaurant. She is so impressed with your choice. She patted his hand. David beamed. The appetizers arrived. They continued their conversation in French, now completely relaxed, believing I was nothing more than a piece of furniture. Le fils de Sao? Bastien asked, cutting into his prosciutto. What about the son? Amélie took a delicate sip of the $450 wine. Le fils est parfait, she whispered. The son is perfect. My blood ran cold. Complètement facile à manipuler et désespéré pour moi. Completely easy to manipulate and desperate for me. She glanced at David, who was busy trying to flag down a waiter for more bread. Je vais l'épouser pour la carte verte, she continued, her voice bored. I will marry him for the green card. It's the only way. My breath caught in my chest. Green card. Corinne, the mother, leaned in. Et l'affidavit de soutien pour le visa K1, and the affidavit of support for the K1 visa. David will sign it, Amélie said. Il signera n'importe quoi. Il pense que nous sommes riches. Il pense que je l'aime. He will sign anything. He thinks we are rich. He thinks I love him. She sighed dramatically. Ces hommes américains sont si stupides, surtout ceux qui sont endettés. These American men are so stupid, especially the ones in debt. Debt. Another piece of the puzzle fell into place. My son David. He was in financial trouble, and he had hidden it from me. He was so desperate that he had fallen for this predator. No. My analysis was wrong. I looked at David again. He was avoiding Amélie's eyes. He was avoiding my eyes. Bastien spoke again. Mais c'est le vieil homme qui a l'argent, l'héritage. But it's the old man who has the money, the inheritance. Amelie's eyes gleamed. Exactement. Une fois que j'aurai la citoyenneté, je divorcerai et prendrai la moitié de l'héritage massif de ce vieux. David est mon billet d'entrée. Exactly. Once I have citizenship, I will divorce and take half of this old man's massive inheritance. David is my ticket in. I felt the rage rising. It wasn't hot. It was ice cold. This wasn't just an insult. This was a conspiracy. They were planning to commit federal immigration fraud. They were planning to steal my money. And they were using my son, my only child, as a tool. And he was letting them. The debt wasn't a secret he was keeping from her. It was a secret he was keeping with her. I understood. David wasn't a victim. He was an accomplice. I endured. For the next hour, I played the part of the simple-minded old father. I marveled at their stories of skiing in Gstaad. I asked naive questions about Paris. I let them patronize me. You must visit us in France, Peter, Corinne said, knowing full well they never intended to see me again after this dinner. Oh, I don't know, I said, shuffling my feet. I'm not much of a traveler. The workshop kept me pretty busy, you know. Yes, Emily said, smiling. We know. Every smile was a knife. Every polite word was poison. But I held on. I listened as they discussed how they would sell my tacky apartment and move into a proper penthouse after the wedding. I listened as they planned their future using my son and my money. David, oblivious or perhaps willfully ignorant, was finally relaxing. His father hadn't embarrassed him. The dinner was a success. He paid the bill. I saw his hand tremble slightly as he signed the credit card slip, and he looked proud. Finally, we were at the door. The valet was bringing their car. David, beaming, hugged me. Thanks so much for coming, Dad. It meant the world to Amélie. Of course, son. Anything for you. I turned to the parents. I shook Bastian's hand. A pleasure. I kissed Corinne's cheek. Enchanté. Finally, I turned to Amélie. She was glowing victorious, the cat who had swallowed the canary. She leaned in for the customary two-cheek kiss. I leaned in close. First in English for David to hear, "It was lovely to meet you, Amélie. You are a remarkable young woman." And then I moved closer, my lips brushing her ear, my voice dropping to a whisper. And in perfect, flawless Parisian French, the French of Geneviève, the French of the 7th arrondissement, I spoke, "J'ai adoré vous rencontrer tous." I loved meeting you all. I felt her freeze. Her body went rigid against mine. L'arrogance et la fraude sont une combinaison dangereuse. Arrogance and fraud are a dangerous combination. I pulled back just enough to look her in the eyes. They were wide pupils dilated in pure animal terror. Je parie que l'agent d'immigration trouvera cela fascinant aussi. I bet the immigration officer will find this fascinating too. The color drained from her face. I mean, it completely vanished. She went from a healthy glow to the color of chalk in 1 second. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. "Dad, what did you say?" David asked, his smile faltering as he saw his fiancée's expression. I turned to him, my folksy, simple-minded mask sliding perfectly back into place. "Oh, I was just trying to practice that French I learned for your mother. I tried to tell her she was as beautiful as a painting. I probably messed it up again. You know, my pronunciation was never any good." I patted David on the cheek. "You kids have a good night." I turned and walked away, leaving Amélie standing on the curb, frozen, watching me go. The war had begun. I closed the door to my apartment, and the city's noise faded, replaced by a deep, familiar silence. The lock clicked shut with a heavy, satisfying sound. I stood in the dark entryway for a long moment, the adrenaline from the restaurant finally draining away, leaving behind a cold, hard clarity. I didn't turn on the main lights. I walked through the living room, the moonlight striping the floor through the blinds. This was my sanctuary. It was a simple two-bedroom apartment in a decent, unremarkable building. The furniture was old, but comfortable. The sofa, a well-worn leather piece, had the faint imprint of where Genevieve used to sit. The walls were filled with books, not expensive art. To David, to Amélie, this was the apartment of a retired carpenter, a man living on a modest pension and social security. I walked to the mantel and picked up the silver-framed photograph. Genevieve. She was smiling, her eyes bright, captured in a moment of laughter in our old garden in the Loire Valley. "Did you hear them, my love?" I whispered to the picture. "Did you hear the filth they spoke using your language in our city? I am not just a carpenter. David thinks I am. He thinks I ran a small, dusty workshop building custom chairs for a few rich clients and then sold it for a modest sum when I retired. He thinks I am Dad, the simple, hard-working man who smells like sawdust and old wool. I let him believe it. I encouraged him to believe it. I walked to my study, a small room dominated by a massive hand-carved oak desk. It was the first piece I ever designed. I ran my hand over the smooth, worn wood. The workshop was not a workshop. It was bespoke by Peter. I started it 45 years ago in a rented garage with 3 tools and a loan I barely secured. When I sold it 10 years ago to a Swiss design conglomerate, it wasn't for a modest sum. They paid $30 million. I looked at my bank statement, which I kept in the top drawer. The number, even after a decade of smart conservative investments, was still staggering. We never told David. Genevieve and I made that decision together. We had seen what new money did to people. We had seen it destroy families, corrupt children, and turn decent humans into arrogant, posturing peacocks like Bastian and Corinne. We hated that world. Genevieve and I, we lived simply. Not poorly, but simply. We valued books over boats, quiet evenings over loud parties, loyalty over luxury. This apartment, this life, it wasn't a hardship. It was a choice. It was a fortress against the very poison I had just sat across from at dinner. But I saw now in the harsh glare of this new reality that my choice had been a mistake. A terrible, arrogant mistake. I had tried to protect David. I wanted him to build his own life. I wanted him to find his own value, to feel the pride of earning his own way, to become a man who wasn't defined by his father's bank account. I didn't want him to be a weak, entitled heir. But in my attempt to forge him in a fire of false scarcity, I had done something far worse. I had made him weak in a different way. I had made him desperate. He was in debt. Amélie had said it. Surtout ceux qui sont endettés. Especially the ones in debt. My son was in debt, and he was so ashamed of his poor father that he couldn't ask for help. He was so desperate for the life he thought he deserved that he had allied himself with a predator. Or perhaps he was the predator. Had he brought them to me, hoping they would be impressed by my non-existent wealth? Or was he in on the plan to steal the massive inheritance Amélie spoke of? An inheritance he didn't even know existed. The coldness in my chest settled into something solid. It settled into resolve. This was no longer just an insult. This was a conspiracy. They were planning to commit federal crimes using my son as a pawn, or perhaps as a co-conspirator. And they had done it all while mocking the memory of my wife. I sat at the old oak desk. I opened a locked drawer on the side. Inside it was not simple. I pulled out a sleek modern smartphone, a burner one I used only for my financial advisors. I turned it on. I dialed the number for Miss Riley, my attorney for 20 years. She was a shark, the best in New York. She picked up on the second ring, her voice crisp and awake even at this hour. "Peter," she said, "this is unexpected." "Riley," I said, my voice steady, the folksy carpenter gone. "I need you. And I need the best private investigator you know. I want a full background check run on a French national named Amélie Dubois, and I want to know everything about her parents, Bastian and Corinne. I want to know where they live, what they own, and if they've ever been charged with a crime." There was a pause. This sounds serious, Peter. They are in my city, I said, looking at Genevieve's picture, and they are trying to destroy my son. I want to know who they are, and I want to know just how much trouble my son is in. The sun rose, but it brought no warmth. I had not slept. The silence in my apartment was absolute. Last night at that restaurant, I had played the part of a bumbling, simple-minded old man. This morning, that man was gone. The man who woke up was the founder of Bespoke by Peter, the man who had built a $30 million company from sawdust and sheer will. I sat at the oak desk and looked at the picture of Genevieve. They had used her language to plot their crimes. They had mistaken my simplicity for stupidity. They had mistaken my grief for weakness. I picked up the burner phone, the one David didn't know existed, the one I used only for my financial advisors. It was 6 a.m. I dialed the private line for Ms. Riley. She was my attorney for 20 years. She was the shark I kept on retainer for exactly this kind of moment. She answered on the first ring. No hello. Just a crisp Peter. Riley, I said. My voice was different. The folksy rasp of the retired carpenter was gone. I have a situation. I assumed you weren't calling at 6 a.m. to discuss the weather. I need you, I said. And I need the best private investigator you have. Not good. The best. Someone discreet, thorough, and fast. I heard a keyboard clicking. I have someone. Thorne. He finds things people don't want found. What's the target? Her name is Amélie Dubois, I said. She's French, mid-20s, engaged to my son David. The clicking stopped. Riley knew my family situation. Engaged, Peter, David never... David is part of the problem. I cut her off. I need to know her visa status. I need to know where she's really from. She claims Paris. I'm guessing Marseille. I need to know if she has a criminal record specifically for fraud anywhere in Europe. Fraud, Riley repeated. She's a con artist, Riley. She's planning to marry my son for a green card. She admitted it last night. She admitted it. In French. She thought I was a senile old fool who couldn't understand. She was wrong. My God, Peter. That's not all, I continued. I need to know everything about David. He's in debt. I need to know how much and to whom. I suspect gambling. I need to know if he's a victim in this or if he's a co-conspirator. He is your son, she said, a rare note of caution in her voice. He is my son, I affirmed. And that is exactly why I need to know. I need to know if I am saving him or if I am protecting myself from him. Riley was silent for a second. Thorne is expensive. I don't care about the cost, I said. I want this done yesterday. I want to know who is sitting at my table. Consider it done, Riley said. Thorne will be in touch before lunch. I hung up. The first piece was on the chessboard. Amélie had made a critical error. She had shown her hand before she knew who her opponent was. She thought she was playing checkers with a senile carpenter. She was about to find out she was playing chess with a king. I walked away from the desk and stood by the window looking down at the quiet street as the morning light grew stronger. My call with Riley had set the wheels in motion, but it didn't calm the storm inside me. It only sharpened the edges of my own guilt. I turned and looked at a framed photo on the bookshelf. David, at 10 years old, grinning, holding up a small, slightly crooked wooden birdhouse we had built together in the old workshop. His eyes were so bright, so full of simple, uncomplicated pride. Where did that boy go? I sat heavily on the worn leather sofa. I had always been so sure of my decision. When Genevieve and I sold the company, we were terrified of what the money could do to him. We had seen our friends' children, the heirs to fortunes, become weak, entitled, and lost. They had no drive, no hunger, no character. They drifted through life, their parents' wealth, a golden anchor drowning them. I swore I would not let that happen to David. He must build his own life, Genevieve, I had insisted. He must feel the pride of his own hands, not the weight of mine. Genevieve, always softer, had worried. But is it not also a lie, Peter, to let him struggle when we could help? Struggle is what builds a man. I had answered, full of the arrogance of a self-made millionaire. He will thank us one day. I was wrong. I was so terribly wrong. I hadn't built character. I had built resentment. I had created a vacuum. I raised him in this simple apartment, taught him the value of $1, sent him to a good state school, but never a private one. I made him get a summer job. I made him apply for his own car loan. I thought I was teaching him to be self-reliant. But all I did was teach him to be ashamed. Ashamed of our simple life. Ashamed of his carpenter father. He saw his friends getting down payments for their first homes, driving new cars gifted by their parents, and he saw his own father in his old wool suit counting his pennies. I didn't forge him in fire. I just made him cold. And that coldness, that constant gnawing feeling of being less than, had made him desperate. He was desperate for the life he saw around him, the life I had secretly kept from him. That desperation is a rot. It eats you from the inside. It makes you blind. It makes you reckless. And then into that vacuum of desperation walked Amélie. She was everything he was taught to admire: sophisticated, rich, European, exactly the kind of person who would never be ashamed of him because she was the status he craved. He wasn't her victim. He was her willing student. This was my fault. I had created the perfect target. I had made my son so hungry for status and money that he couldn't see the predator in front of him. He was so desperate to escape the poverty I had manufactured for him that he was willing to sign anything, believe anything, and even betray his own father, just to get a taste of the life he felt I had denied him. I closed my eyes. The regret was a physical weight, but it passed, replaced by that cold, hard resolve. I had made a mistake, a $30 million mistake in judgment, but I was still here. And if I had inadvertently created this monster of desperation in my son, I would be the one to deal with the consequences. I would fix what I had broken. The sun was barely above the horizon when my regular phone rang, the old landline I kept in the kitchen. Not the burner. This was the phone David knew. I let it ring 3 times before picking it up, shuffling my feet to the receiver to complete the performance, even though no one was watching. "Hello," I said, my voice thick with false sleep. "Dad." It was David. His voice was high, cracking with a panic that was almost palpable through the line. "Dad, what did you do? What in God's name did you say to Amélie?" I paused, clutching the receiver. I made sure to sound confused, vulnerable. "David, what's wrong? It's 7 in the morning. I didn't say anything. I just said goodnight. Is she all right? Is she all right?" "She's hysterical. She's been up all night, Dad, crying. She said you threatened her. She said you insulted her in French." I injected a note of horrified embarrassment into my voice. "Oh, David, no. No, I was just trying to be nice." I let out a small, pathetic-sounding sigh. "You know the French. The French I learned for your mother. I was just trying to practice. I was trying to give her a compliment." "A compliment!" David shouted, his voice echoing slightly. "She said you threatened to call immigration. She said you called her a fraud. Immigration." I said, my voice now a perfect imitation of a bewildered old man. "Why on earth would I say that? Good heavens. Oh, this is terrible. I think I tried to say she was très jolie, you know, very pretty. Maybe I mixed it up with something else, my pronunciation. It's just so bad, son. I'm so sorry. She must think I'm a complete fool." There was a long silence on the other end. I could hear David breathing heavily, processing my story. He wanted to believe me. He needed to believe me because the alternative was too terrifying. Finally, he let out a long, exasperated breath. the sound of a son burdened with a bumbling, incompetent father. "Dad," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "Just don't. Okay, just please, don't try to speak French anymore. Ever. You scared her half to death. She's very sensitive." I held the phone, my knuckles white. Sensitive, I thought. No, she's not sensitive. She's cornered. She's not crying because she's hurt. She's crying because she's been caught. She knows that I know. She really thought you were threatening her. David continued, his voice lowering as he tried to calm himself. Can you imagine how ridiculous? As if you would even know how to do that, or who to call. "Oh my goodness, no," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "That's awful. I just wanted her to feel welcome, part of the family. David, you have to tell her I'm so sorry. I'm just a silly old man. I'm embarrassed." It's fine, Dad," he said, trying to sound magnanimous. I'll handle it. I'll calm her down. I'll tell her you're just, you know, you didn't mean it." Yes, you do that, David, I thought. You go calm down the predator who is planning to ruin you both. "But please," he said, his voice firm now, "at the wedding, just smile and nod. Okay, nothing else, and no French, no stories, just smile and nod." "Of course, son. Whatever you say. I am so terribly sorry." He hung up without saying goodbye. I placed the receiver back on the hook. I was not smiling. The condescension in his voice, "I'll handle it," told me everything. He thinks he's managing his senile father. He has no idea he's just a pawn caught between his father's $30 million secret and his fiancée's web of international fraud. The call had worked perfectly. Amélie was running scared. And when a con artist is scared, they get sloppy. They get desperate. They accelerate their plan. She would push David harder now, and I would be waiting. "Threaten her," I repeated, allowing a note of pure, horrified confusion into my voice. "David, good heavens, no. I was just trying to speak your mother's language. I was trying to be nice." I let out a small, pathetic-sounding sigh, a performance I had perfected over years of boardroom negotiations. "You know my French is terrible, son. It's all rusty." I was trying to tell her. I think I was trying to say, "très jolie," you know, very pretty. Maybe I mixed up the words jolie and fraud. I faked a wince. "Oh, this is terrible. She must think I'm a complete fool." There was a long, heavy silence on the other end of the line. I could hear David breathing a ragged, uneven sound. He was processing my explanation. He wasn't processing it for its truth. He was processing it for its plausibility. He needed to believe me. To believe that his Parisian fiancée, the sophisticated woman he was so proud of, had somehow misunderstood his bumbling old father was infinitely preferable to the alternative. The alternative that she was lying, or worse, that I was telling the truth, was a reality his debt-ridden, desperate mind could not afford to accept. "Dad," he finally said, his voice dropping, all the panic replaced by a weary, condescending exhaustion. "She said you threatened to call immigration. She said you called her a fraud." "Immigration!" I exclaimed, injecting pure bewilderment. "Why on earth would I say that, David? That's absurd. I might have said admiration. Maybe I pointed at her and said admiration, my pronunciation. It's just so bad. I'm so sorry. I just wanted her to feel welcome, part of the family." Another pause. He let out a long, slow breath. It was the sound of a man choosing to believe a convenient lie over an inconvenient truth. "Dad," he said, and the condescension was so thick I could almost taste it. "Just don't. Okay. Just, please, don't try to speak French anymore." Ever. You scared her half to death. She's very sensitive. I held the phone, my knuckles white. Sensitive. The word was a joke. She wasn't sensitive. She was cornered. She wasn't crying because she was hurt. She was crying because she had been exposed. She had walked into that dinner believing she was playing a simple game with a fool and a pawn. She had discovered in that one whispered sentence that the fool was not only a player, he was holding all the cards. She didn't know what I knew, only that I knew something. The ambiguity was eating her alive. She really thought you were threatening her, David continued, his voice lowering, as he settled into the role of the capable son managing his senile father. Can you imagine how ridiculous? As if you would even know how to do that, or who to call. Oh my goodness, no, I said, my voice trembling slightly. That's awful. I'm just a silly old man. I'm so embarrassed. You have to tell her I'm sorry. It's fine, Dad, he said, trying to sound magnanimous. I'll handle it. I'll calm her down. I'll tell her you're just, you didn't mean it. Yes, you do that, David, I thought, staring at Genevieve's picture. You go calm down the predator who is planning to ruin you both. But please, he said, his voice firming up, now the dutiful son laying down the law. At the wedding, just smile and nod. Okay. Nothing else, no French, no stories about the workshop. Just smile and nod. Of course, son. Whatever you say. I am so terribly, terribly sorry. And he hung up without saying I love you or goodbye. I placed the receiver back on the hook. My hand was perfectly steady. The condescension in his voice, I'll handle it, told me everything. He thinks he's managing his confused father. He has no idea that he is just a pawn caught between my $30 million secret and his fiancée's web of international fraud. The call had worked perfectly. Amélie was running scared. And when a con artist is scared, they get sloppy. They get desperate. They make mistakes. They accelerate their plan. She would push David harder now. She would demand he secure the K-1 visa, that he sign the affidavit of support, that he get access to my inheritance. They would move faster. And in their haste, they would leave a trail. I smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. Okay, Amélie, I whispered to the empty room. You want to play, let's play. For 3 days I lived in a state of suspended animation. I went through the motions. I made my coffee. I read the newspaper. I answered David's daily check-in call with the same feigned apologetic confusion. He in turn was sickeningly cheerful. Amélie had forgiven me. She understood it was a silly mistake. They were so excited for the wedding. Every word he spoke, every forced pleasantry felt like a small betrayal. I was the simple-minded old man, again being managed, handled. I played the part. I smiled and nodded into the phone. But underneath, I was counting the minutes. On the third afternoon, the burner phone vibrated. It was a text from a number I didn't recognize. Mr. Peter, this is Thorne. I have what you asked for. Your lobby. 10 minutes. My heart hammered against my ribs. I sent a simple okay and went to the door. I waited. Exactly 10 minutes later, the doorbell rang. Mr. Thorne was not what I expected. He wasn't a grizzled man in a trench coat. He was young, sharp, wearing a well-fitted suit and carrying a slim leather briefcase. He looked more like a Wall Street analyst than a private eye. He had cold, intelligent eyes that missed nothing. Mr. Peter, he said, offering a firm handshake. Ms. Riley speaks very highly of you. Come in, I said, closing the door behind him. You were fast. The digital trail is faster than most people think, Thorne said. He didn't sit. He walked straight to my oak desk and placed his briefcase on it. May I? I nodded. He opened it. Inside were not messy files, but a single sealed manila envelope. Let's start with the fiancé, he said. Amélie Dubois, age 28, entered the United States from Paris 6 months ago on a B2 tourist visa valid for 6 months. He paused, letting the implication land. 6 months ago, I repeated. To the day, Thorne confirmed. Her visa expired 62 days ago. As of this moment, she is in the country illegally. Any application for adjustment of status like a K-1 fiancé visa is now complicated. She's desperate. This confirmed what Amélie herself had said. I will marry him for the green card. It's the only way. She wasn't just planning to, she had to. What about her family? I asked, sitting heavily on the sofa. They seemed affluent, Parisian. Thorne almost smiled. It was not a kind expression. They flew in from Paris, yes, but they don't live there. They live in the 15th arrondissement of Marseille. And not the nice part. The father, Bastien Dubois, has no registered employment. He's been living on state benefits for 5 years. The mother, Corinne, has a string of charges for petty theft. Shoplifting. They aren't aristocrats, Peter. They're professional grifters. They cashed out everything they had to fly here and put on this show for your son. The image of them in the restaurant, their tailored clothes, their condescending remarks about my suit flashed in my mind. It was all a costume, a performance. So they're frauds. I whispered the word, tasting like ash. That's the polite term for it, Thorne said. He reached into the envelope and pulled out a printed document with a red banner across the top. This is why they're here. This is why she fled France. This is an Interpol notice. Amélie Dubois, or whatever her real name is wanted for questioning in Lyon and Bordeaux. She's not just a petty grifter like her parents. She's a specialist. He slid the paper across the desk. She specializes in the elderly, specifically wealthy, lonely widowers. She finds them, charms them, drains their retirement accounts, and disappears. She's accused of defrauding 2 men. One lost his entire pension. The other, a man in Bordeaux, died of a heart attack 3 weeks after she cleaned out his life savings. She fled the country before she could be formally charged. I stared at the paper. This wasn't a game. This wasn't a simple green card marriage. This was a predator, a dangerous one. And she was in my city, engaged to my son, and she had just sat at my table. She had called me an old cow. My God, I said. My son, David. He's a fool, but he doesn't deserve this. He's walking right into her trap. Thorne looked down at his shoes. It was the first time his professional mask had slipped. He looked uncomfortable. Peter, he said, his voice softer. That's the other part of the investigation. The part you asked me to run on David. I looked up. What is it? He's not walking into the trap, Thorne said, meeting my gaze. He is the trap. I didn't understand. What are you talking about? Thorne slid a second, much thicker folder across the desk. It wasn't a single paper. It was a stack of bank statements, credit card reports, and website printouts. Your son is not a mid-level manager in good standing, Thorne said bluntly. He is a man 1 paycheck away from total catastrophic ruin. He is $150,000 in debt. The number hit me. $150,000, I said, standing up. How is that possible? I taught him to be responsible. Online sports betting, Thorne said, tapping a printout of a website based in Curaçao. He's been chasing his losses for over a year. He started small. Then he took out a payday loan. Then another. He's leveraged everything. He co-signed a luxury car lease with Amélie 2 months ago, a car he absolutely cannot afford. He's maxed out 3 credit cards. He's desperate, Peter, more desperate than she is. I slumped back onto the sofa. The room felt like it was tilting. The pieces clicked into place, but they formed a picture that was monstrous. So, I said, my voice barely a whisper. Amélie thinks David has money, or that I do, and David thinks Amélie has money. Exactly, Thorne said. Your son met a wealthy French tourist. He saw her as his lifeline, his way out of the hole he dug. He was so desperate to impress her to keep her that he lied about his own finances. And she in turn saw a simple-minded American with what she assumed was a wealthy family, a direct line to a green card, and an inheritance. I looked at Thorne, the full sickening truth finally settling in. They aren't just lying to each other, I said. They're allied. They're both looking at me. Thorne nodded grimly. They are two drowning people, Peter. And they have just agreed to use you as a life raft. The only question is, who plans to drown who first? I looked at the picture of Genevieve. Her smile seemed to mock me. I had tried to protect my son from wealth, and in doing so, I had handed him over to something far worse. He wasn't my foolish, victimized son. He was a desperate stranger. And he was in my house. Thorne left as quietly as he had arrived. He closed the apartment door, leaving me alone with the 2 manila folders resting on my oak desk. They sat side by side, 2 thin stacks of paper that represented the total wreckage of my family. One folder for Amélie, the international predator, the specialist in elderly fraud, the fugitive. One folder for David, the local failure, the compulsive gambler, the desperate debtor. I had spent the last 3 days hoping that one was the victim and the other was the villain. I had prayed that my son, my foolish, naive son, had been blinded by this sophisticated criminal. I had been preparing to save him from her. I picked up David's folder. $150,000. I ran my thumb over the edge of the credit card statements. The bitter truth settled on me cold and heavy. My initial analysis was wrong. It was so much worse. They were not lying to each other. They were lying with each other. This was a partnership, a grotesque alliance of mutual desperation. I pictured the dinner replaying every moment. Amélie believing David was the son of a wealthy man, the heir to my massive inheritance. David believing Amélie was a wealthy French socialite, his financial lifeline. They were 2 professional liars, each holding a false mirror up to the other, and they were both so blinded by their own greed that they believed the distorted reflection. David needed money. He was drowning. He owed $150,000 to people who do not accept installment plans. He had met this sophisticated European woman and saw his salvation. He wasn't just her victim. He was her salesman. He was selling me to her. He was presenting his simple father as the key to a future inheritance, the stable, wealthy background she was looking for. He was willing to trade his own father for a chance to clear his debts. And Amélie, she was even more desperate. She was in the country illegally. She was wanted by Interpol. She needed a green card, and she needed it yesterday. David, with his American citizenship, and his simple father, who must have some money, was her perfect, easy ticket. He was her path to legal status, her shield from the French authorities. They were 2 parasites who had found each other, each believing the other was a viable host. But the host was me. I was the one they were both feeding on. I was the inheritance Amélie planned to take. I was the stability David was using as collateral. I was the senile old man they would both manage, control, and ultimately bleed dry. They were united in a single unspoken goal to get what was mine. This changed everything. This wasn't a rescue mission. This was a war, and the enemy was not just at the gate. The enemy was my own blood. I stood up and walked to the window. The call I had made to David, the one where I pretended to be a bumbling fool who had misspoken in French, that was a mistake. I had thought I was being clever, scaring her, but I hadn't realized David was in on it. Now Amélie knew that I knew something. She knew I was not a senile fool. She would be terrified. And David, desperate for his $150,000, would be pushed by her. They would be cornered. And cornered animals are not cautious. They are lethal. They would stop playing the long game. They would stop the polite dinners and the subtle charm. They would move fast. They would become aggressive. They needed my money, and they needed it now. The pretense was over. The real fight was about to begin. I looked at the picture of Genevieve, her kind smile looking back at me. "I tried to protect him, my love," I whispered. "I tried to build a good man. But I failed." I turned back to the desk. The failure was a bitter pill, but the resolve it created was steel. I was not just a father. I was the man who had built an empire from nothing. They thought I was a simple old carpenter. They thought I was weak. "All right, David," I said to the empty room. "All right, Amelie. You want my money. You want my house. You want my massive inheritance." I picked up the phone to call Riley. "You will have to come and take it." I stared at the 2 folders on my desk. They were no longer just files. They were declarations of war. The revelations settled in not as a shock, but as a cold, hard alignment of facts. My analysis of the dinner, my call with David this morning, it was all wrong. I had been playing the game, but I had been playing it against the wrong opponents. Amelie, she was not just an arrogant socialite. She was a fugitive, a professional. She was wanted in 2 countries, and she was in my city illegally. My little slip of the tongue at the restaurant, the 2 sentences in perfect Parisian French. I had intended it as a warning shot, a clever reveal to scare her off. What a fool I was. I hadn't scared her off. I had cornered her. A cornered animal doesn't run. It attacks. She knows I am not a senile fool. She knows I speak French. She knows I understand exactly what she said: green card, inheritance, fraud. She knows that I know. She now sees me not as a bumbling old cow to be tolerated, but as a direct, immediate threat to her entire plan. She is not just fighting for a payday anymore. She is fighting for her freedom. She cannot allow me to go to the police or to immigration. I am a witness who must be silenced. And David, my son. The $150,000 gambling debt was the key. He wasn't a pawn. He wasn't a victim blinded by love. He was an accomplice chained to her by his own desperation. He needed my money to save his own skin, likely from people far less polite than Amelie. That phone call this morning, his panic wasn't just fear of her being upset. It was the terror of his meal ticket, his rich fiancée getting spooked and flying the coop. When I gave him that confused old man excuse, he didn't believe me. He chose to accept it because it was the only way to keep the fragile alliance together. He had to go back to her and say, "It's fine, he's just a senile old fool, he didn't mean it, the plan is safe." But Amelie knows better. She knows exactly what I said. They have lost the one thing a con artist needs: time. They can no longer afford to play the long game. The subtle manipulations, the gentle suggestions about a nursing home, the plan to wait for my inheritance, all of it was now off the table. Amelie's visa was expired. David's creditors were closing in. And I, the simple father, had just revealed I was a wild card. They will not be patient. They will not be subtle. They will not ask me for money again. The next step would be to take it. They would move from manipulation to coercion. They would try to get my signature on a power of attorney. They would try to gain access to my accounts. And when I refused, I looked at the Interpol notice again. One man died of a heart attack 3 weeks after she cleaned out his life savings. My blood ran cold. They wouldn't just try to get my money. They would try to get me. They would try to make my inheritance available as quickly as possible. A sudden fall in the workshop, a tragic accident for a confused old man living alone. It was so simple. I stood up and walked to the kitchen, my hands steady. The fear was real, but the clarity was sharper. They were coming for me, and they were coming fast. They believed they were hunting a simple carpenter. They believed I was old, isolated, and after my performance this morning, that I was now terrified of their anger. I let out a slow breath. Good, I whispered to the empty room. Let them think that. Let them think I'm scared. I picked up the phone. I had one more call to make. Not to Riley. Not to Thorne. David, I said, my voice deliberately shaky when he answered. Son, I've been thinking. About what you said. About needing help for the wedding. I think I overreacted. I'm sorry. I was just confused. Please, can you and Amelie come over tomorrow? We need to talk. I want to help. I didn't have to wait long. My apology call was the gasoline they needed for their fire. The next evening, my doorbell rang. Not the polite buzz of a guest, but a long, impatient press. I opened it. They stood there framed in the dim hallway light. The transformation was startling. The charming, sophisticated Parisians from the restaurant were gone. Amelie was not wearing an elegant dress. She was in tight jeans and a leather jacket, her hair pulled back harshly. Her beautiful face was cold, impatient, and her eyes were like chips of ice. David stood beside her, his shoulders slumped. He wouldn't look at me. He was pale, and his hands were jammed deep into his pockets. The stench of desperation and cigarette smoke rolled off them. David, Amélie, I said, forcing a trembling, conciliatory tone into my voice. I played the part of the father who was terrified of having upset his son. Thank you for coming. Please come in. I made some tea. They walked past me into the apartment. They didn't remove their coats. Amelie's eyes scanned my simple living room, but this time there was no polite disdain. There was only calculation. She was looking at my things as if she were an auctioneer estimating the value of every book, every lamp, every piece of worn furniture. I'm so glad you came, I stammered, shuffling after them. About the other night, David, I've been thinking. Dad. David cut me off. His voice was flat dead. He turned to face me, and for the first time he met my gaze. His eyes were bloodshot. I'm not here for tea. I'm not here for apologies. Amelie stood by the window, her arms crossed, tapping her foot. She was watching me. Okay, son, I said, playing the confused father. Then, what is it? Is something wrong? David took a deep breath. This was the moment, the performance he had rehearsed. Dad, I'm going to get straight to the point. I need $200,000. The words hung in the air, blunt and brutal. The sheer audacity of it was breathtaking. Not, can I borrow, not, I'm in trouble, just, I need. I executed my role perfectly. I stared at him, my mouth falling open. I let my eyes widen in theatrical shock. I even took a small, stumbling step backward, grabbing the back of a chair for support. $200,000, I whispered, as if I couldn't comprehend the number. David, what on earth are you talking about? That's a fortune. I let a weak, desperate laugh escape me. Son, where would I get that kind of money? I'm a retired carpenter. I live on my savings. My pension, I don't have anything like that. David's face, which had been pale, now flushed a dark, angry red. Don't lie to me, Dad. Don't play this game. Game, I said, my voice trembling. This isn't a game, $200,000. I probably don't even have a tenth of that in my entire account. What do you need it for? Did something happen? I'm in trouble, Dad. He exploded, finally unleashing the desperation he had been holding in. I'm in serious trouble. I made some bad investments, and I need this money. I need it for the wedding. I need it to secure our future. Amelie's family. They're helping, but I have to do my part. But David, I pleaded, I can't give you what I don't have. I can help, of course. I have a few thousand saved. I can cash in a CD. Maybe I can get you 10,000. Would that help? I offered the 10,000 like it was my last drop of blood, the pathetic life savings of a poor old man. David looked like he was about to hit me. 10,000. What is that supposed to do? That's not even a... He was interrupted by Amélie. She let out a short, sharp, ugly laugh. It was not the charming musical laugh from the restaurant. It was a scoff. Assez, she snapped. Enough. She walked forward, stepping between me and my son. She was shorter than me, but she radiated a dangerous, feral energy. Her eyes were narrowed. The mask was completely gone. Stop it, she said, her French accent suddenly thick and harsh. Stop this pathetic old man act. We are not stupid. Amélie, darling, I stammered. I don't know what you mean. Oh, tais-toi, she hissed. Shut up. You don't have $200, $1,000. You who speaks perfect Parisian French. You who understood every word we said at that restaurant. Do you think I am a fool? I executed the role of a lifetime. I stared at him, my mouth falling open in a perfect imitation of disbelief. I let my eyes widen, and I took a small, stumbling step backward, my hand instinctively reaching out to grab the arm of my worn-out reading chair, as if to steady myself. $200,000. I whispered, my voice cracking on the words. I made sure it sounded thin, reedy, the voice of an old man who had just been struck. David. I looked at him, my expression a mask of pure, wounded confusion. What on earth are you talking about? That's a fortune. That's more money than I've ever seen in one place. I let out a weak, sputtering laugh, as if the request was so absurd it was almost a joke. Son, where would I get that kind of money? I looked around my simple living room, gesturing helplessly at the old furniture, the bookshelves, the faded rug. I'm a retired carpenter. I live on my savings, my pension. I don't have anything like that. I watched his face. David's jaw was clenched. His eyes were dark, not with sadness, but with a raw, ugly impatience. He looked like a cornered animal. Amélie stood behind him silent, her arms crossed her face, a mask of cold contempt. She was the snake, and he was the puppet she was forcing to dance. Dad, David said, his voice a low growl. Don't play this game with me. Don't act stupid. Game, I said, letting my voice tremble. I put a hand to my chest, feigning a sudden pain. This isn't a game, David. This is shocking. $200,000. I probably don't even have a tenth of that in my entire account. What do you need it for? Did something happen? Are you in trouble? I pushed the concerned father button, the one I had pushed for 38 years. It was the wrong one. I'm in trouble, Dad. He exploded, his voice finally breaking free. He took a step toward me, his face flushing a dark, angry red. Yes, I'm in trouble. I'm in serious trouble. I made some bad investments, and I need this money. I need it for the wedding. I need it to secure our future. Amélie's family, they're helping, but I have to do my part. But David, I pleaded, sinking into the chair, my body language a study in defeat. I can't give you what I don't have. I can help, of course. I have a few thousand saved for an emergency. I can cash in a CD. Maybe I can get you 10,000. Would that help? I offered the 10,000 like it was my last drop of blood, the final pathetic life savings of a poor old man. David looked at me as if I had just spat in his face. 10,000, he repeated, his voice filled with a low, vibrating rage. What is that supposed to do? That's nothing. He was clenching and unclenching his fists. I am telling you I am in serious trouble, and you offer me $10,000. It's all I have, liquid son, I stammered, shrinking back into the chair, playing the part of a man terrified by his son's anger. I'd have to talk to the bank. Enough. The word cut through the room sharp and cold as ice. It wasn't David. It was Emily. She had been standing by the window, but now she stepped forward into the center of the room. The charming, sophisticated Parisian girl was gone. The woman standing there now was a stranger. Her eyes were narrowed, her posture was aggressive, and the sweet accent had been replaced by a clipped, harsh tone. "Stop it, Peter," she said. "Stop. Stop what, my dear?" I asked, my voice trembling. "I'm just trying to help." "Stop this pathetic old man act," she snapped. "We are not stupid. You are not a fool. You understood me perfectly at the restaurant, and you understand me perfectly now." My heart was pounding, but I kept my face a mask of bewildered terror. I don't know what you mean. I told David I messed up my French." "Oh, taise-toi," she hissed, the French word for shut up sounding like a curse. "I am done playing. David is too weak for this, so I will be direct." She took a step closer. "We know you have money. Don't lie to us. We know what this apartment is worth. This building, this neighborhood, we've had it appraised. It's worth at least $500,000, maybe more." My feigned shock was genuine this time. They had it appraised. They had already been investigating me. "Emily," David started, his voice weak. He looked terrified of her. "Shut up, David," she ordered, not even looking at him. Her eyes were locked on me. "Your father is playing games. We need the money, Peter. And you have it. You are sitting on it." This apartment," I said, my voice breaking. "This is my home. It's all I have left. It's where Genevieve. It's where your mother." "It's a box," Emily said, waving her hand dismissively. "It's an asset, and we need to liquidate it. We need proof of funds for the K-1 visa. David has to show the government he can support me, that he has significant assets. This apartment, selling it, is the only way." Sell my home," I whispered, looking at David. "Son, for a visa." "It's just a building," Emily said, her voice devoid of all emotion. "You're old. You don't need all this space. You can get a smaller place, a room in a home. We are what's important now. David's future. Our future." She smiled, then a cold, thin smile that showed all her teeth. "So you will sell it. Or we will find a way to sell it for you." I stared at her. The sheer naked aggression of the threat. "Sell it for me," hung in the air of my quiet apartment. I felt a tremor, partly real, partly for show. This was it. The mask was completely off. I turned my gaze, full of feigned desperation, to my son. "David," I pleaded, my voice a weak rasp. "Son, what is she saying? Tell her this is our home. This is where you grew up." David wouldn't look at me. He stared at a spot on the floor, his face pale and slick with a thin sheen of sweat. "Dad, just listen to her," he muttered. She knows about these things." He had made his choice. He was abdicating. He was letting this stranger, this predator, handle his own father. Amelie saw his weakness and took another step forward, her tone shifting slightly. She was no longer just the aggressor. Now she was the rational one, the one explaining the unfortunate reality. "Peter," she said, clasping her hands in front of her as if she were a patient teacher. "You don't understand the process. It is not just that we want the money." She glanced at David. "David has to prove he can support me. For the visa, the K-1 visa. The American government, they are very strict. They need to see that my future husband is financially stable." She was using the truth as a weapon, twisting it. "He has to sign a document," she continued, "an affidavit of support. He has to show assets, income, and his income, well," she waved a hand, It is not enough, not for the standard they require. They will look at his job, his accounts. They will see he is struggling. Struggling? I asked, playing my part. David, you told me your job was going well. It is, David said, defensive and weak. It's just, the commission structure changed. It's temporary. It is not enough, Emily snapped, silencing him. And they will deny my visa. We will be separated. All because you are selfishly holding on to a pile of bricks. She softened her voice again, a master manipulator. We need to show them a significant asset in David's name, a bank account. If we sell this apartment, we can put $200,000 into his account. Just for a little while. Just to show the immigration officer. Then once the visa is approved, we are all a family. We can find you a very nice new place, a smaller one. The lie was so beautifully constructed. It was plausible. It was urgent. It was wrapped in the language of bureaucracy and family. They didn't just want the money to pay David's debts. They wanted the money first to secure her legal status, then they would pay the debts and dispose of me. I looked at David. He was nodding, watching me with desperate, pleading eyes. Please, Dad, just do it. Just give them what they want so this can be over. He was a willing participant in the destruction of his own father. I absorbed her words. I let the silence stretch, filling the room. I looked at the worn-out rug. I looked at the photo of Genevieve on the mantel. I looked at my son, this weak, desperate stranger who was willing to sell his home, his memories, his father, all to pay for his own mistakes and to chain himself to this criminal. I had given him $10,000. He wanted $200,000. He wanted my home. I slowly lifted my head and looked directly at Amélie. My trembling stopped. My voice, when it came out, was not the reedy whisper of a frightened old man. It was quiet, but it was as solid and unmoving as the oak desk in my study. No. The single word, quiet but absolute, landed in the center of the room, with the force of a physical blow. Amélie froze. Her carefully constructed mask of rational concern didn't just crack, it shattered. Her face, which had been arranged in lines of persuasive charm, contorted into something ugly and real. Her eyes, which had been wide with feigned sincerity, narrowed into venomous slits. She stared at me, her entire body vibrating with a rage she was no longer attempting to conceal. "What?" she hissed, her voice dropping to a low, dangerous growl, her Parisian accent thickening. "Did you just say, 'I said no'?" I repeated, my voice still quiet. I did not move. I did not flinch. I just looked at her, the simple 70-year-old carpenter, meeting the gaze of a predator. "You selfish old man," she finally exploded. The shriek was so sudden and loud that it made David jump. "You stupid, selfish old pig! Who do you think you are? You sit here in this dump, this museum of dead memories. And you think you have the right to say no?" She was pacing now, her movements jerky and full of fury like a caged animal. "We are offering you a chance to be useful, a chance to help your only son, and you spit in our faces." "Amélie, please," David whispered, reaching for her arm. "Don't you touch me," she screamed, yanking her arm away. She whirled on him. "And you are pathetic. You let this fossil control you. He has the money, he is just hiding it. Make him give it to us." David, caught between her rage and my refusal, completely fell apart. He turned to me, his face crumbling, his voice breaking into a desperate, pleading whine. "Dad, please," he begged, his hands clasped together as if in prayer. You can't do this. You don't understand. I'm in trouble. You're ruining my life. You're ruining everything." "I am not ruining anything, David," I said, my voice firm. "I am protecting my home." "It's just a house," he cried, tears of genuine, terrified desperation wellsting in his eyes. "It's just a pile of bricks." You're choosing bricks over your son, over me. He took a step closer, his face a mask of frantic appeal. Dad, if you don't do this, I'll lose her. Do you understand me? I will lose her. If she will leave you because I won't sell my home, I said, then she is not worth keeping. You don't know her, he shouted. You don't know anything. She's everything to me and her family. They're helping us. They're offering us a future. And you're throwing it all away because you're too stubborn to leave this old apartment. She's right, David. Emily said, her voice now a cold, menacing purr. She had stopped pacing. She was looking at me with pure, unadulterated hatred. He doesn't care about you. He never has. He'd rather sit here alone with his dead wife's ghost than help his living son. The mention of Genevieve was a calculated strike. I felt the ice in my veins drop another degree. I kept my expression blank. Dad, David said, his voice dropping to a desperate, shaky whisper. This was his last card. The one he had been holding. The one he knew was my greatest weakness. If you don't help me, if you let me walk out that door, I'm done. Do you hear me? He was crying now, fat, hot tears of self-pity rolling down his cheeks. If you don't give me this money, I swear to God, I will walk out of here and you will never see me again. You will never meet your grandchildren. You will die alone in this miserable room. Is that what you want? Is that what you're choosing? The threat hung in the silence. The emotional blackmail was absolute. He was putting a gun to the head of our entire relationship and telling me to pay the ransom. He was forcing me to choose between my home and my son. I looked at him. My son. The boy I taught to ride a bike. The man who was now trying to destroy me. I saw his tear-streaked face, his trembling hands, and I felt nothing. Not anger, not sadness, just a profound, empty pity. He was so weak, he was so lost. I stood up slowly from my chair. I did not raise my voice. My answer, I said, looking from his desperate, weeping face to Amelie's cold, hateful one, is still no. I then did something I had never done in my life. I walked to my own front door. I opened it. I believe this conversation is over, I said, holding the door open. Please leave my home. For a second, they just stared at me, stunned by the finality of it. David let out a sound like a wounded animal. Dad, no, you can't. Emily grabbed his arm. Her face was a terrifying mask of rage. Fine, she spat. Fine, keep your miserable apartment. Keep your dusty memories. She pulled David toward the door, shoving him past me into the hallway. She stopped at the threshold and looked at me one last time. You will regret this, old man, she whispered, her voice trembling with venom. I promise you, we will get what we are owed. I'll be waiting, I said quietly. I closed the door in their faces. I turned the deadbolt. The click echoed in the sudden absolute silence of the room. They were gone, and I was alone. The war was no longer coming. It was here. My answer, quiet and final, hung in the silence of the room. My answer, I said, my voice as cold and hard as granite, is still no. David looked at me as if I had physically struck him. The tears of self-pity froze on his face, replaced by a stunned, hollow disbelief. He had played his last card, the threat of my eternal loneliness, and it had failed. He had nothing left. Amelie, however, was different. Her face did not register shock. It registered something far more dangerous, pure calculating hatred. The mask of the grieving fiancée, or even the angry woman, was gone. What looked back at me was the cold, flat gaze of the predator from the Interpol report. The woman who left a man to die of a heart attack. Fine, she spat. The word was a single sharp chip of ice. Fine. Keep your miserable apartment. Keep your dusty memories. She grabbed David by the arm, her painted nails digging into his sleeve, yanking him with a force that was surprisingly strong. Come, David. The old fool has made his choice. He would rather die alone than help his own son. Pathetic. David didn't move. He was still staring at me, his face a crumpled mask of betrayal. Dad, he whispered, his voice broken. You can't. I can. I said, my voice firm. And I have. I walked past them, past the son who was pleading, and the woman who looked like she wanted to murder me. I walked to my own front door. I turned the handle. I pulled it open, letting the dim light of the apartment hallway flood in. I believe this conversation is over, I said, holding the door open. Please leave my home. The finality of the act of me physically opening the door finally broke through David's shock. It was replaced by a sudden explosive rage. The rage of a cornered man, the rage of a gambler who has just lost his final hand. You're choosing this goal, he screamed, his voice cracking. You're choosing this junk over me, over your family. You and she, I said, nodding toward Amélie, stopped being my family the moment you decided my home was an asset to be liquidated. Amélie pulled David toward the door. She shoved him past me into the hallway. She stopped at the threshold, her face just inches from mine. You will regret this, old man, she whispered, her voice trembling with a venom that was almost tangible. I promise you, we will get what we are owed, one way or another. Amélie, let's go, David yelled from the hall. He then pointed a trembling finger at me, his face distorted with a childish fury. You'll be sorry. When you're old and sick and you have no one, you'll remember this. You'll remember this, and you'll be sorry. I'll make you regret this. I already do, I said quietly. I closed the door in their faces. I heard him pound on the wood once, a frustrated, impotent thud. Then I heard them, their angry voices echoing as they moved down the hall, Amélie hissing at him in French, David cursing. Then silence. I turned the deadbolt. The click of the lock echoed in the empty room. They were gone, and I was alone. The war was no longer coming. It was here. They had threatened me, and I knew with absolute certainty they would be back. The dead-bolted door felt like a temporary shield. I knew they would be back. I just didn't know how or when. I spent the next 24 hours in a state of high alert. Every creak in the building, every footstep in the hall made my heart jump. I sat at my oak desk, the folders from Thorn open, staring at the faces of my son and his accomplice. I was no longer a father. I was a target. The burner phone vibrated on the polished wood. It was Riley. I snatched it up. Peter? Peter. Her voice was sharp, no pleasantries. They didn't wait. They just did something incredibly stupid. I felt a cold dread. What did they try to access the accounts? Worse, Riley said. They went to court. This morning, David has filed a petition for an emergency conservatorship. The word hung in the air. Conservatorship, like what they do for people who are incapacitated. Exactly. Riley's voice was grim. He's trying to have you declared legally incompetent. He is petitioning the court to grant him temporary emergency control over your person and your estate. All of it. This was it. This was the attack. Not a fist, not a break-in. It was a clean legal blade aimed directly at my throat. On what grounds? I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. Oh, it's a work of art, Riley said with bitter sarcasm. I'm looking at the filing right now. He's claiming his father Peter is suffering from rapid-onset senile dementia and paranoid delusions. Delusions, I repeated. Yes, and he's provided a sworn statement as evidence. Exhibit A. The dinner at La Stravaganza. He claims you became agitated and aggressive. He states that you spoke threateningly to his fiancée in a language she didn't understand, causing her extreme emotional distress. He's painting your French reveal as the rambling of a confused, dangerous old man. I closed my eyes. They were twisting my one moment of clarity into a symptom of insanity. It gets better, Riley continued. He claims you are a danger to yourself, that you are frail, living alone in a cluttered apartment he's implying hoarding, and that you are incapable of managing your daily needs or your finances. He's attached photos of your modest apartment as proof that you aren't living in a manner consistent with, well, with anything really. He's making you sound poor and crazy. I gripped the edge of the desk. The betrayal was so profound, it was suffocating. He was using the very simplicity I had raised him in the life I chose as a weapon to prove I was incompetent. But here is the masterstroke, Peter, Riley said, her voice laced with a new kind of anger. He's not just coming after you, he's coming after me. What do you mean, Chuck? The petition claims that you are a vulnerable adult who is being subjected to undue influence, that your lawyer, Ms. Riley, has isolated you from your loving family and is coercing you into making irrational financial decisions against your own interests. I was speechless. They're not just trying to take your money, Peter, she said. They are trying to invalidate your mind, discredit your allies, and paint themselves as the loving, worried family trying to save you from a predatory lawyer. It's a classic textbook move, and it's disgusting. So, I said, the cold resolve settling back in. What happens now? The judge has set an emergency hearing. 72 hours. They want to get you in a room, paint you as a confused old man, and have a court-appointed doctor evaluate you. They're betting you'll fall apart on the stand. They're betting that you are the senile fool they're describing. I looked at Genevieve's picture. I thought of her language being used as aggressive rambling. I thought of my son, my own blood, standing in a court of law and swearing that I was insane. Good, I said. Riley paused. Good. They've just made a fatal mistake, Riley, I said. They've taken the fight off the street and into your world. They've brought this into a courtroom. They've just given us a legal binding public stage. Peter, this is dangerous. They're trying to take away your rights. I know, I said, and we are going to let them try. I want that hearing. I want them in that room. I want them to make their case. I want them to put their lies on the official record. I stood up. The scared, confused father was gone. They think I'm a senile old carpenter. Fine. Let's go to court. And let's show them what this senile old carpenter can do. I stood up from my desk. The initial shock of his betrayal, the sheer cold-blooded audacity of the conservatorship petition, began to fade. It was replaced by a familiar feeling, a sensation I hadn't truly felt since the early days of building my company, back when I was negotiating impossible contracts and facing down competitors who thought I was just a simple craftsman. It was the feeling of the hunt, the feeling of an opponent who through pure arrogance had just made a critical, fatal error. Good, I said, my voice quiet. Riley paused on the other end of the phone. Peter, did you hear me? I said, this is dangerous. They are trying to take away your fundamental rights. I know, I said. I walked to the window, looking down at the busy street. And they have just made a fatal mistake. They've taken the fight out of my apartment and into your world, Riley. They've brought this into a courtroom. There was a silence as she processed my words. I could almost hear the gears turning in her sharp legal mind. They've just given us a legal binding public stage, I continued, thinking aloud. They are the ones filing the petition, which means they are the ones who have the burden of proof. They have to stand up in front of a judge and provide evidence that I am incompetent. And they'll have to do it under oath, Riley said. Her voice had changed. The shock was gone, replaced by the same cold, strategic tone I felt. They will have to present their evidence of your delusions and paranoia. They will have to swear to it on the record. Exactly, I said. They think they are dragging a confused, senile old man into a hearing for a quick evaluation. They think I'll be flustered, that I'll ramble, that I'll prove their case for them. But what they're really doing, Riley finished, the picture becoming clear to her, is giving us the perfect, legally admissible opportunity to introduce Mr. Thorne's entire report as a counter-argument. A grim smile touched my lips. They are petitioning the court to examine my mental state, and in response we will petition the court to examine their motives, their credibility, their character. We can submit Amelie's expired visa, Riley said, her voice quickening. The Interpol notice. The fraud allegations from France. We can submit David's $150,000 gambling debt as proof that his petition is not based on familial concern, but on profound, desperate financial coercion. They are walking into a legal trap of their own making, I said. They think they're the hunters, but they're the prey. Peter, this is brilliant, Riley said. It's high risk, but it's brilliant. If we play this right, we don't just win. We annihilate them. In a court of law, on the public record, they will have legally perjured themselves. They want a hearing, I said. We will give them a hearing. They want to put my mind on trial, fine. We will put their entire lives on trial. I looked at the picture of Genevieve, her kind, honest eyes. They think I'm a senile old carpenter. Let's go to court, and let's show them what this senile old carpenter can do. I let the legal documents sit on my kitchen table for a full day. I let the weight of them, the clinical, cruel language, seep into me. Petitioner David Miller alleges that his father, Peter Miller, is suffering from paranoid delusions, unable to provide for his own food, clothing, or shelter. A danger to himself. A danger to myself. I sat there in my clean, quiet apartment, and I practiced. I practiced the voice. I let my shoulders slump. I practiced a tremor in my hands. I thought about the last scene of King Lear, a play Genevieve and I had loved. I was preparing for the most important performance of my life. On the second morning, I picked up the landline, the dad phone. My fingers, steady and strong from 45 years of working oak and walnut, now fumbled with the buttons, deliberately clumsy. I let it ring and ring. I let the anxiety build. He picked up on the fifth ring, his voice sharp and annoyed. "Hello? David," I said. I pitched my voice high, thin, and full of a terrible, breaking fear. I let a sob catch in my throat. "David, son." There was a heavy sigh on the other end. "Dad, what is it?" "It's 9 in the morning." He sounded like a man burdened by an irritating chore. I got them, David," I whispered as if I was afraid to say the words out loud. I got the papers." "What papers, Dad? I'm busy." The court papers," I said, and then I let my voice crack a full, wet, tearing sound. "David, why are you doing this, incompetent? They say I'm incapacitated. They say I have delusions." "Son, what? What does this mean?" I could hear him shift. His tone changed. The annoyance was replaced by a cold, cautious superiority. He had me. He thought I was broken. "Dad, just calm down. It's a formality. It's for your protection. We're worried about you. You haven't been yourself since the dinner." "But to court?" I pleaded, my voice watery with tears I wasn't actually shedding. With strangers. A judge, David, I can't. I'm scared, son. I'm so scared." "Dad, you don't have to be scared," he said, and I could hear the patronizing smile in his voice. "This is a good thing. It just means that Amelie and I can help you. Help you manage things. Your finances. The apartment. Your 70 dad. It's too much for you. We just want to take the burden off. The burden. My $30 million burden. I'm sorry. I whispered the masterstroke of my performance. I let my voice collapse into a sound of utter defeat. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to upset Emily. I'm just an old man. I get confused. I let out a long, shuddering breath. You're right. You're right. I'm just old. It is too much for me. I don't want to go to court. Please, David. Please don't make me go in front of a judge. I'll sign the papers. I'll sign whatever you want. Just make this stop. The silence on the other end was electric. It was the sound of a predator closing its jaws. It was the sound of total, unadulterated victory. Dad, he said, his voice now dripping with a false saccharine kindness. Dad, are you sure? That's very wise of you. That's so reasonable. I just don't want any more trouble, I whimpered. I just want my son back. I'll sign them. Okay, Dad. Okay, he said, his voice full of relief and something else triumph. I'll bring them over right now. We can sign them and this will all be over. Amelie will be so relieved. We can be a family again. Yes, I said. But not here. What do you mean, not here? He asked, a flicker of suspicion returning. I'm ashamed. I whispered, my voice thick. I don't want to sign them here. In my home. And those papers, they said Ms. Riley was the problem. That she was influencing me. She is the problem, Dad, David said, his voice hardening again. Then let's do it there, I proposed, my voice trembling with fake inspiration. At her office. Please, David. I want her to see me sign them. I want her to see that I'm choosing you. That you were right all along. And then she'll have to leave me alone. She'll have to leave us alone. Please. There was another longer pause. I could hear him thinking. I had just handed him not only my entire estate, but the chance to humiliate my predatory lawyer in her own office. It was a victory so total, so perfect, he could almost taste it. Dad, he said, his voice thick with suppressed, gleeful laughter. That is a fantastic idea. Yes, that is perfect. Tomorrow, I asked, my voice small. At 10 a.m., he confirmed. At Riley's office. We'll be there. Amelie and I and Dad. Don't worry. This is for the best. You are finally doing the right thing. Thank you, son, I whispered. Thank you. I hung up the phone. I looked at my hand. It was perfectly steady. I stood up and walked to my desk. I picked up the burner phone. Riley, I said, my voice clear and cold as steel. It's done. They're coming. Tomorrow, 10 a.m., your office. Are you ready for this, Peter? She asked. I looked at the picture of Genevieve, at her strong, honest smile. I'm not, I said, but I'm going to be. Get Thorne. Get the audio evidence. Get the Interpol notice. Get everything. Tomorrow, we end this. Riley's conference room was the opposite of my apartment. It was a sterile, cold box of glass chrome and black leather 20 floors above the city. It smelled of success and expensive cleaning supplies. I sat at the far end of the massive, polished mahogany table. I felt small in my old wool suit. It was a deliberate choice. I kept my hands folded in my lap, ensuring they had a slight age-appropriate tremor. Ms. Riley sat at the head of the table, her face impassive. She was a woman in her 50s, sharp as a shard of glass. In front of her sat 3 stacks of folders. One for David, one for Amélie, and one the thickest for me. At 10 a.m. on the dot, the heavy glass door hissed open. David and Amélie entered. They didn't just walk in. They made an entrance. David was wearing his tight new suit, the one he couldn't afford. His chest was puffed out, and he was smiling a wide, false, triumphant grin. He looked like a conqueror who had just taken a city. Amélie glided in beside him, her hand possessively on his arm. She was radiant, dressed in a sharp, cream-colored pantsuit. She looked at me sitting at the far end of the table, and her smile was not kind. It was the smile of a predator that had finally cornered its prey. She was practically purring. "Dad," David said, his voice loud, magnanimous. "We're here. We are so glad you decided to be reasonable." Amélie glided over to me and placed a cold hand on my shoulder. "Peter, you are doing the right thing. For the family." Yes, the family," I murmured, not meeting her eyes. I looked at my lawyer. "Ms. Riley, they are here. I'm ready to sign the conservatorship papers, the petition." My voice was weak, reedy. I let it tremble. I just want this to be over. I don't want to go to court." Riley nodded, her face a perfect mask of professional neutrality. "Very well, Peter. But as your legal counsel, I must advise you, I must ensure you understand exactly what you are signing away." I know, I said, waving my hand dismissively, playing the part of the agitated, confused old man to perfection. "I'm signing it all over to David, to manage. He and Amélie will manage everything. They're young. They understand these things." I turned to David as if seeking one last reassurance. "But before I sign, just for my own peace of mind, son, just so I understand. You need this. You said you were in trouble." David's smile tightened. He exchanged a quick, annoyed glance with Amélie. He wanted the signature, not a conversation. "Dad, we talked about this. It's for our future. To set things up. To get us started right." "I know, but..." I pressed my voice a pathetic, pleading whisper. The $200,000. You said you needed it. Is it just for the wedding?" David's face flushed. "It doesn't matter what it's for, Dad. It's just a loan. A business thing." "No." Riley's voice cut through the air sharp as a razor. "It's not." All eyes snapped to her. David and Amélie stared. Riley slowly, deliberately opened the first folder. "It's $150,000, David, and it's not a business loan." David froze. He looked as if he had been slapped. Riley looked at him, her eyes devoid of all emotion. "It's gambling debt, online sports betting, to 3 different offshore lenders, one of whom I'm told is known for particularly aggressive collection tactics." I watched Amélie. It was beautiful. Her triumphant smile didn't just fade, it collapsed. Her eyes widened just slightly. Her mouth parted. She turned her head very, very slowly to look at David. "Gambling," she whispered, her English suddenly shaky, the French accent thicker. "David, what is she talking about? What gambling?" David was sputtering. He looked from Riley to Amélie, his face pale. It's, it's a lie. It's manageable, Amelie, darling. Don't listen to her. This is what she does. She's the one, Dad. Dad, tell her. Oh, he can't tell you anything, I said. My voice was suddenly clear. The tremor was gone. I looked at Amelie. Because he's sponsoring your visa, isn't he? He's signing an affidavit of support. He's promising the United States government that he can support you financially. That's why he needs the money, isn't it? To look rich for immigration. I turned to her. And Amelie, just for the record, before I sign my entire life away, I'm a bit confused about your finances too. Your visa, the K1. Where is it? I'd love to see it. Amelie's face went from pale to chalk white. She was looking at me, but she was seeing a ghost. It is processing. At the embassy. In Paris. It is fine. No. Riley said, her voice flat. She opened the second folder. It's not. There is no K1 visa application on file. Because you can't file for one. Riley looked up first at a shocked David, then at a terrified Amelie. Your B2 tourist visa expired 62 days ago. You are in the United States illegally. The silence in that glass room was absolute. It was so quiet, I could hear the faint hiss of the building's ventilation system. Amelie and David weren't looking at me. They were staring at each other. It was a horrifying, fascinating moment. I was watching two predators, two professional liars, simultaneously realize that the person they had allied with was also a complete fraud. David was staring at Amelie, his face a mask of pale, dawning horror. The Parisian heiress, his ticket out of debt, his sophisticated European bride, was an illegal immigrant, a common criminal. Amelie was staring back at David, her expression one of pure, unadulterated contempt. The stable American, the son of a man with a massive inheritance, the man who was supposed to be her easy legal path to a new life, was a broke, desperate gambler. Their entire alliance, their entire future had just evaporated. What? David whispered, his voice hoarse. Amelie. What is she talking about? Illegal? That's a lie. Gambling. Amelie hissed, her voice a low, venomous, snake-like sound. 150,000 you lying pig. You have nothing. Quiet, Riley said, her voice like a whip. I slowly pushed my chair back. The legs scraped quietly against the floor, and I stood up. I was no longer the slumped, trembling old man. I stood up straight to my full height. The fog of confusion I had worn like a cloak for the past 48 hours vanished. I unbuttoned my old wool suit jacket. I looked at my son. And then I looked at her. My voice when I spoke was not the reedy, weak whisper of Peter the carpenter. It was the clear, cold command tone of Peter Miller, the man who had built a $30 million company from nothing. You are both liars, I said. They both flinched, their private argument instantly forgotten. They turned to stare at me. The real me. You, I said, pointing a steady finger at my son. David, you are not a concerned son. You are a desperate gambler. You are $150,000 in debt to men who will not wait patiently for their money. You found this woman, and instead of seeing her for the predator you saw a lifeline. You tried to sell me your own father to pay for your failures. You stood in a court of law in this very document. I tapped the conservatorship petition on the table, and you swore under oath that I was insane, all to get your hands on my money to pay your debts. David shrank back, his face white with guilt and terror. I then turned to Amelie. And you, I said, my voice dripping with the contempt I had held back since that dinner. You are not a Parisian socialite. You are a common criminal. You are wanted by Interpol. You prey on old men. You fled your country to escape charges for fraud. You are here illegally, and you saw my son in his weakness and his desperation, and you decided to use him. You planned to commit marriage fraud to get a green card, and then, I leaned in, you planned to divorce him and take half of this old man's massive inheritance. Your words, not mine. David looked at me speechless. But Amélie, she was a fighter. The shock lasted only a second, replaced by a surge of pure, desperate rage. She had been conned, and she knew it. But more than that, she had been exposed. She lunged not at me, but verbally. You lying old bastard! She shrieked, her voice echoing in the sterile room. You have nothing, You're making this up, Interpol, illegal. You are bluffing, you can't prove any of this. She turned to David, her eyes wild, trying to pull him back to her side. David, don't you see? He's lying. He's a paranoid old man, just like we said. He's making it all up to scare us, to stop us. David looked from her face to mine, his mind clearly unable to process the conflicting realities. Dad, he whispered. I didn't say a word. I just looked at Riley. Ms. Riley, who had been silent this entire time, slowly leaned forward. She pressed a single button on the sleek conference phone in the center of the table. You can't prove it, you say? Riley's voice was calm, almost bored. Let's review the evidence for your petition, shall we? You claim your fiancé's extreme emotional distress was caused by Peter's delusions at the restaurant. Is that correct? Before David could answer, Riley pressed another button. Dieu, il ressemble à un fermier. Amélie's voice filled the room. It was her voice, yes, but it was the charming, musical, sophisticated voice from the dinner. It was the voice David had fallen in love with. David's head snapped toward the speaker, his confusion total. We all sat in silence and listened. We heard her call me an old cow. We heard her parents laugh. And then we heard her clear as a bell lay out her entire future. Le fils est parfait. Complètement facile à manipuler. The son is perfect. Completely easy to manipulate. I watched David's face, his brow furrowed. He was trying to understand his own French, clearly not good enough. Je vais l'épouser pour la carte verte. I will marry him for the green card. David froze. Une fois que j'aurai la citoyenneté, je divorcerai et prendrai la moitié de l'héritage massif de ce vieux. Once I have citizenship, I will divorce and take half of this old man's massive inheritance. The recording clicked off. Riley looked at Amélie, whose face was a mask of sheet-white horror. This recording was made by Mr. Thorne, a licensed private investigator at La Stravaganza. It is time-stamped, authenticated, and perfectly legal. It proves conclusively that there was no delusion. Peter heard exactly what you said, and it proves your entire relationship is based on a conspiracy to commit immigration and financial fraud. Amélie just stared, her mouth open, making no sound. But I wasn't watching her. I was watching David. He hadn't moved. He was still staring at the speakerphone. He had heard it. He had heard the cold, clinical calculation in her voice. He had heard her call him a ticket. He had heard her plan to divorce him. He had thought he was the one in control, the one using her to solve his debt. He had believed she was his rich, sophisticated partner. In that one 30-second audio clip, he learned the truth. He wasn't her partner. He wasn't even her pawn. He was her mark. He made a small sound, a high-pitched, choked gasp. David! Amélie started, her voice a desperate whisper. David turned his head very slowly and looked at her. It was the look of a man seeing a complete, terrifying stranger. Then his legs buckled. He didn't just sit down. He collapsed. He fell sideways into one of the expensive leather chairs, his body folding in on itself. He put his face in his hands, and in the dead silence of that glass-walled room, my 38-year-old son began to sob. Ugly, racking, broken sobs. He had been played. By her. And by me. And he had just lost everything. David was still gasping, his sobs echoing in the stunned silence of the room. Amélie was frozen, her eyes wide with a terror that was beyond rage. She looked from me to Riley and back to David, who was now just a quivering mass of shame. You she whispered, her voice a low, trembling hiss. You planned this. Both of you. I planned nothing, I said, my voice cold and steady. I just listened. You provided the script all by yourselves. She opened her mouth to scream, to curse me, to perhaps lunge across the table. But the heavy glass door to the conference room hissed open. It wasn't a soft sound. It was the sound of an ending. David's sobs hitched in his throat. Amelie's head snapped toward the sound, her body tensing like a wire. 4 men entered. They did not knock. They didn't ask permission. They walked in with the heavy, unhurried confidence of men who own every room they enter. 2 were in dark blue tactical vests with the letters ICE emblazoned in white across their chests. They were federal all business, and their eyes immediately found Amelie and locked on her. The other 2 were in rumpled off-the-rack suits, but they wore their authority like a second skin. Local police detectives. David's head shot up, his tear-streaked face a picture of utter, uncomprehending confusion. What? What ICE detectives, Dad? What is this? Amelie, who had faced me with such cold fury, looked for the very first time genuinely bone-chillingly terrified. The color drained from her face, leaving behind a sallow, chalky white. She wasn't just a con artist anymore. She was a fugitive, and the law had just found her. I don't understand, she stammered, pushing her chair back. Let me clarify for you, Riley said. She stood up calm and in complete command. She gestured to the detectives. Detectives, this is David Miller. He's the man who filed the fraudulent conservatorship petition against my client this morning based on perjured statements. Then Riley nodded toward the ICE agents. And that is Amélie Dubois, the subject of your ongoing immigration and fraud investigation. Investigation? David choked out. Yes, Mr. Miller, Riley said, her voice cutting through the air like a blade. When you and Ms. Dubois filed a legal petition this morning, you officially opened this matter to the court. As Peter's counsel, I was then legally obligated to respond with all the evidence we had gathered to refute your claims. She tapped the folders on the table. So this morning I contacted the appropriate authorities. I informed U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement that a French national, Amélie Dubois, was currently in the country on an expired visa and was at this very moment actively engaged in a conspiracy to commit marriage fraud to obtain a green card. I also informed the NYPD Elder Abuse Unit that a son, David Miller, was attempting to defraud his elderly father via a perjured conservatorship petition, backed by $150,000 in gambling debts. Riley smiled, a thin, sharp, terrible smile. You invited us to a legal hearing, so I just invited all the other interested parties. The lead ICE agent, a tall man with cold, flat eyes, took a single, unhurried step toward Amélie. He had her, and they both knew it. Amélie Dubois. His voice was a flat monotone that cut through the silence. She was a statue carved from chalk. She couldn't speak. She just gave a tiny, jerky nod, her eyes darting between the agent and the door. You are in violation of your visa terms, the agent said. Your B2 tourist visa expired 62 days ago. You are in the country illegally. You are being detained pending deportation. He reached for her wrist, and all the fight, all the Parisian arrogance, all the venom just vanished. It drained out of her, leaving an empty, terrified shell. She didn't scream. She didn't curse. She made a small choking sound, like a child, as he pulled her hands behind her back. Furthermore, the second agent added, his voice just as devoid of emotion, you are being charged with conspiracy to commit marriage fraud. At the word fraud, David finally snapped out of his own shocked stupor. What? No, that's a mistake, he cried, his voice cracking. She loves me. We're getting married. One of the detectives, the older one in the rumpled suit, turned to him. He didn't look at me. He just looked at David with a profound, weary pity. Mr. David Miller. Yes. But this is about her, David said, his voice rising in panic as he tried to put distance between them. She's illegal. I didn't know. I'm the victim here. She lied to me. No, Mr. Miller, the detective said, pulling out his own set of handcuffs. The small click they made echoed in the room. This is about you. David's face, which had been a mask of confusion, now crumpled into total childlike bewilderment. Me, I was just trying to help him. I was worried. The detective didn't stop. He calmly, firmly took David's arm. David Miller, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit elder financial abuse against your father, Peter Miller. What? No, Dad! David shrieked, finally looking at me, his eyes wide with terror and disbelief. Dad, tell them, it's a misunderstanding. I love you. I was just confused. The detective was efficient. He cuffed David's right wrist. And you are also under arrest for perjury and filing a fraudulent legal document with the New York Superior Court, specifically the emergency conservatorship petition you filed this morning, which, as we have all just heard, was based on a complete and malicious fabrication. Dad, why? David wailed, his legs buckling. He was sobbing now, a full-body racking sob. Why are you doing this? Please tell them to stop. I did not move. I did not speak. I just stood there, my hands clasped behind my back, and I watched. I watched as the ICE agents led a silent, ashen-faced Amélie out of the room. Her game was over. And I watched as the detectives pulled my son, my only child, to his feet. He was a wreck, babbling, crying, still not comprehending that his senile father had been the one to orchestrate his downfall. They were two liars, two criminals who had thought they were smarter than everyone in the room. And they had just learned in the worst way possible that they were wrong. The detectives pulled David to his feet. He was a wreck, babbling, crying, still not comprehending that his senile father had been the one to orchestrate his downfall. Amélie was already out the door, a silent, white-faced ghost escorted by the ICE agents. She did not look back. But David, he resisted. He stopped at the doorway, his body sagging against the detective's grip. He looked over his shoulder, his face a ruin of tears, snot, and absolute soul-crushing shame. Dad, he wailed, his voice breaking, reverting to that of a terrified child. Dad, why? It was the last desperate question of a man who still, even in this moment, believed he was the victim. He was not asking why he had been caught. He was asking why I had been the one to catch him. Why I had not just played the part, been the senile old fool, and let him have what he wanted. I did not walk toward him. I remained standing by the mahogany table, solid as the oak I used to carve. I looked at my son, this stranger in handcuffs. Why? I repeated. Because your mother taught me that family is built on truth. Your mother, Genevieve. Her entire life was about honesty, about loyalty. She taught me that love is truth. I looked at the weeping, broken man who was my son. You took our family. You took our language. And you turned it all into a lie. You took the legacy she left me and you tried to trade it for her. For gambling debts. I didn't have a choice, he sobbed. You always have a choice, David. I said, my voice cold and final. And you chose this. You chose lies. And I chose to honor her. I chose the truth. The detective pulled him, and he was gone. The fallout was swift, just as Riley had predicted. Amélie Dubois was not in a position to negotiate. She was an illegal immigrant and a wanted fugitive. She was deported back to France within 72 hours, where I read months later that she was facing a lengthy prison sentence for the fraud she had committed in Bordeaux. She was no longer my problem. David was a different matter. He faced the court. Riley presented the case, the perjury, the elder abuse petition, the conspiracy to defraud. But I stepped in. I spoke to the judge not in public, but in chambers. I asked for leniency. He was my son. He was weak, foolish, and corrupted, but he was my son. I did not want to destroy him. I just wanted him to learn. He was convicted. He received 5 years of probation and 2,000 hours of community service. He lost his job. He lost his reputation. He lost everything. He would have to start his life over from zero with no inheritance waiting for him. That was his lesson. As for me, I finally had work to do. I sold that quiet, simple apartment. I took my $30 million out of the shadows. A month later, I established the Genevieve Foundation. It is a fund dedicated to helping real immigrants, people who come to this country with honesty and hope, who find themselves abused or defrayed by predators like Amelie. It helps them find lawyers. It helps them find safety. It is a legacy built in my wife's language, the language of truth. I had protected her memory, and I had finally reclaimed my own dignity. This story teaches us a powerful lesson. Appearances are a dangerous illusion. The people who obsess over projecting an image of wealth and sophistication, like Amelie and her parents, are often hiding the deepest moral and financial emptiness. True strength and real wealth, like Peter's, are quiet, built on integrity, and require no validation. Greed is a language of its own, and it will always expose those who speak it, while honesty, even when it is silent, holds the ultimate power. Have you ever encountered someone who wasn't what they seemed? Let me know in the comments below.